I am 74 years old, living on a quiet row of red brick terraces. The letter slips through the letterbox just as the phone on speaker says, "Don't open it." I am in the kitchen with the kettle just coming to the boil, a tea towel over my shoulder, the envelope wet from the British rain. Don't open it? After 7 decades, I ask the plainer question. Have I kept silent to lock someone out or to lock myself in? In the next 45 seconds, I'll give you exactly 2 small steps to stop paying with silence while keeping your kindness intact. Then we'll open the letter. The room divides itself. The whistle says open it. The voice on the phone repeats, don't. I tap the speaker off and listen to rain chasing along the guttering. Here's the conflict in its simplest form. A quiet prohibition facing a human need to tell the truth from a 74-year-old woman who's decided not to vanish from her own story any longer. The bell goes again, a soft ding-dong down the hall. I pull the empty chair closer and feel my throat try to swallow the word no, the way it has since childhood. This time, I keep it. I pinch the envelope and tear along the perforation. Paper makes a small sound. Memory answers with a larger one. My story began when I was 8, in a house where being good meant small, quiet, helpful. Back then I kept saucepan lids from clattering. Now I hold this envelope to open my own voice. The caller, gentler now. Listen to me first. I turn the phone face down on the kitchen table. If peace only exists while we keep our mouths shut, it isn't peace. It is pressure, dressed as harmony. I slide the page out. The rain has smudged the ink, but the first 3 words stand clean. I'm sorry for... I pause not to wring suspense, but to check my breath. I used to measure calm by other people's breathing. Today, at 74, I measure it by mine. The chime trembles again. Not everyone wants this letter read. But avoidance doesn't heal. It merely puts pain off till later. I pour a cuppa for the empty chair, not saving anyone a seat, but reminding myself that at 74 in this very kitchen, I have the right to sit in my own life, and that the first crack appeared when I was 8. Outside, the rain softens. In my hands, the paper is still damp, its edge ruffling like a heartbeat, settling after a steady walk. Here's the question that swings the gate. Does kindness include silence when the truth needs speaking? If your answer wobbles, let it wobble. Wobble means the main post is ready to be replaced. I breathe in, breathe out, look at the opening line, and read. Mornings in this house follow a small liturgy. I open the kitchen blinds on the red brick terrace opposite. The pavement glistens from last night's shower. The kettle clicks on. The aga gives off a soft heat I pretend not to rely on, and I wipe the formica table with a tea towel that has seen more winters than some of my neighbors. I set 2 places out of habit, a mug of builder's tea for me, and a plain white cup for the empty chair opposite. There's a Radio Times folded to the crossword, a pair of reading glasses resting like a small bridge, and the week's bus timetable held to the fridge by a magnet shaped like a seaside donkey. Outside, the postie does his round. Inside, the clock in the hall keeps a polite tick-tock, the kind that never startles. I rinse a Bramley apple, slice it neatly, and put half on a saucer for later. These are the arrangements that make a day behave. When you've lived as long as I have, you become tender with furniture, cautious with noise, and loyal to things that keep their promises, kettles, cardigans, straight-backed chairs. They don't ask much, they simply hold. I catch my reflection in the kettle, a woman whose hands have learned to move carefully as if the air itself were full of china. I pour the first cuppa, set it by the empty chair, and feel that old tilt in the room as if someone might still come in and say, "Leave it with me." On the top shelf sits a small biscuit tin, stenciled with bare keys. Front door, back gate, a brass one whose lock we no longer remember, and a small Yale tied to a luggage label in my mother's handwriting. Keys are for doors, of course, but also for drawers and diaries and certain afternoons you don't talk about. I can still hear Mum's voice, Lancashire, flattening the edges of the words, "Keep yourself nice. Don't make a fuss. Be useful." No one wrote it down. It lived in the awkward pauses around the dinner table, in the way a plate could be put down harder than necessary, in a look held 3 seconds too long. We were tishkip people. We apologized to furniture. We kept pegs and pears and washing lines straight as rails. Goodness was measured by quietness, helpfulness, the neat overlapping of knives and forks. The tin clicks when I take it down, a sound like a small verdict. I polish the unknown key with the corner of the tea towel and see my face in its oval head, a miniature, blurred. There is a lock somewhere that this belongs to. There always is, even if the door has been painted shut by time and 100 careful weekends. I place the tin back. It is good to know where your spares are, even if what you really need is courage rather than metal. When I was 8, being good meant being small. I learnt the grammar of quiet, closing drawers with a hand on the wood so they didn't thud, carrying plates like library books, moving around a room as if the carpet might bruise. I could tie an apron bow the right way and fold a school PE kit into a square that would make the headmistress proud. At tea, if a teaspoon fell, we said nothing except clumsy and smiled as if the word was a joke that didn't cost. You'd be surprised how far a smile can travel without moving the mouth. We weren't beaten, it was subtler. The air withdrew a little when you failed at being convenient. Later, I discovered there's a name for it, withholding, but back then it was simply the weather indoors. I grew skilled at reading it. The sigh that meant not now, the chair pushed back, that meant you've said enough. The silence that meant fix it. 8 is an age for learning tables. I learnt temperatures, how to keep the room from tipping into cold. Decades on, the body carries its own weather report. Stand me in any kitchen, and I will still reach to steady a saucepan when nobody asked me to. I sometimes wonder what else those careful hands kept from breaking. At primary school, I chose the seat by the window. The playground plane trees threw leaf-shaped shadows on our exercise books, and the dinner lady smelt of soap and coins. When I tripped on the curb and turned my ankle, I said I was fine, and thanked the boy who carried my satchel, because thanking is easier than explaining. Once, in assembly, the head asked what we were grateful for. I said the library because it had a radiator you could lean on without getting told off. Children know what warmth means even if they can't spell it. A kindly teacher noticed I winced when lifting my arm to the chalkboard. She crouched, voice low. "Is everything all right at home?" I nodded, automatic as a curtsy. My childhood had a motto, "We're fine." We were always fine. We were professionals. Years later, I still default to fine when I mean I don't have the words yet. In this country, We are champions at it. The cup of tea first, trouble later. Out on the street, a black cab hissed past in the rain. In the classroom, I copied out spelling words necessary, separate, accommodate, and thought how good adults are at separating what they mean from what they say. The bell rang. I breathed. The day carried on, bident as a cue. Nights were for counting, not sheep. I counted breaths. If the house breathed evenly, so did I. I knew the central heating boiler's bedtime cough, the way the wind found the gap in the old sash, the fox that took the lane at 1:30 like a neighbor with a secret. Some evenings, I made hot Horlicks, rinsed the mug twice so no skin formed, and sat with the radio tuned low to voices that argued about faraway parliaments. In those days, my safety came second-hand. I borrowed it from whoever was calmest in the room. It took me years to notice how heavy other people's comfort can be when you carry it for them. In the mirror, my face learnt the art of agreeable. My tongue learnt to say, "Perhaps you're right," when I knew perfectly well they weren't. The body is patient up to a point. At 74, it files formal complaints, knees, back, lungs kind, but unambiguous. Choose. Choose truth over tidiness. Choose the open window over stale air. I wash the mug, stack it to dry, and lay out tomorrow's cardigan on the chair back as if preparing a witness. It still surprises me how relief sounds like a house settling after central heating clicks off. The envelope is still damp when I ease the page out. Ink has bled along the fibers like little estuaries, but the opening holds. I'm sorry for it is not signed in any way a solicitor would accept. No address, no date beyond the smudge of today's postmark, but it carries a familiar gravity, the sort that bends a room around it. I stand at the sink with the page on the draining board, smoothing it with the heel of my hand as if that could press time flat. The phone, face down, buzzes and falls silent. I think of what an apology can do at 74. It can widen the doorway, yes, but it can also call old weather back, the kind you don't hang washing out in. The kettle clicks off. I pour what's left of the hot water into the mug, top it with a splash of milk, and force myself to read the first paragraph, lips moving though no sound comes. The words are plain, almost bureaucratic in places, as if someone had tried to make shame tidy. I'm not sure whether to sit or to stand. My knees decide for me. After lunch, I pretend to proceed as normal. There is a GP appointment to book, a prescription to order before the bank holiday, a direct debit to check, because the gas company changed their tariff without telling anyone properly. I move through these tasks with a steadiness I've had years to practice, but the page keeps glancing at me from the counter like a person in a queue who thinks it might be their turn. I pick it up, set it down, pick it up. The letter mentions nights and how the writer couldn't sleep then either. It mentions misunderstandings. Boy, the adult word we give to the children we trained to understand too quickly. A flock of starlings ripples past the window. I catch myself counting them like I once counted breaths. The phone rings again, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message is short. Please don't make a fuss. We're all older now. I delete it, then fish it back from the recently deleted like a bad habit. In the afternoon, the rain stops. The light slides along the worktop in the house, waits to see which way I'll lean. That night, the old techniques report for duty. I fold the tea towel. I check the back door twice. I line the remote controls so their noses point the same way because certain diagonals feel like a challenge. I make Horlicks rinse the mug and sit where the armchair knows my shape. Sleep will not come. When it does, it is the thin kind that rips if you turn over. At 2:30, I wake to the boiler's cough and think of the sentence in the second paragraph, how the writer says they did what was necessary, and how the word necessary is doing most of the work. At 4, I try prayer the way I learnt it, simple, factual, polite. At 5, I give up, watch the sky collect itself behind the terraces, and understand the first cost of the letter. Doubt paid in hours. Morning finds me softer in the joints and sharper in the mind. The page is where I left it, by the fruit bowl, weighted with an apple as if it might float away. By breakfast, I decide on a small courage. I ring a number on a leaflet I keep by the phone, the sort of community helpline you mean to try for other people. A woman answers with the unhurried voice of someone who has heard worse and survived it. She doesn't ask me to prove anything. She asks what I need today. I say, to read a letter out loud without apologizing for the noise it makes. She suggests I put the kettle on, which is the kindest sentence in Britain, and we walk through the first 3 lines together. Saying them changes them. They are still wet with the past, but they stop slipping in my hands. When we hang up, I fetch the spare keys tin and take out the small Yale with the luggage label in my mother's hand. I don't try it in any lock. I just set it on the table beside the page, a small metal promise that doors have more than a one side. Outside, a blackbird starts up. I clear my throat, square the paper, and read the letter again, this time all the way to the end. The next day, I keep the letter under a paperweight and old glass dome with a map of the Lake District trapped inside so the words can't wander. I phone the surgery, navigate the keypad maze, and let the hold music pluck at my nerves. The receptionist is kind in that brisk NHS way that means the phone never stops ringing. I ask for a slot to talk sleep and blood pressure. She offers Thursday, and I thank her as if she had brought soup. When I hang up, the house sounds too large. I dust the skirting boards, polish the taps, pair socks with a concentration that would shame a watchmaker. By late morning, I decide I will tell no one. If I keep the circle tiny, 1 kettle, 1 table, 1 woman, perhaps the weather will hold. This is my first fix. Become smaller than the problem. If I'm quiet enough, shame will have no echo. In the afternoon, the phone rings from a number I know. A voice that once set the temperature of rooms opens with small talk and swings towards reconciliation as if it were a meeting you could book. I step into the hallway where sound is flatter, easier to manage. The phrases arrive pre-packed. We were all young. Nobody knew better. Surely at our age, we can let the past be the past. I hear myself apologizing for their discomfort, a reflex so old it has its own postcode. When the call ends, I stare at the receiver as if it had misdialed my life. I put the kettle on and brew a cuppa that tastes like surrender. I realize I have trained for decades to be the one who makes other people feel better about what they did. By early evening, I try a second fix. Own everything. If I take the blame, perhaps I won't have to hold the anger. And anger at my age feels like walking uphill with a rucksack full of cutlery. I turn the letter's misunderstandings into my misunderstandings, the noise I made, the questions asked, the times I failed to anticipate a mood. I draft an email that thanks the writer for their honesty, assures them I understand, and suggests we draw a line under it all. Read aloud, the words sound smooth and house-trained. I delete the draft, restore it, delete it again, because habit is a faithful dog. The window holds a pale Manchester sky the color of dishwater. If I accept responsibility for what was never mine, I will have to return it to myself later with interest. The arithmetic is not kind. Just after 9, the doorbell goes 3 short, tidy notes. Through the frosted glass, I recognize the outline of a coat I could describe from memory. My hand rises to the chain, but stops. Old choreography cues in my muscles. Open, welcome, smooth over, pour tea, explain away. The knock comes twice, then a pause, then the scratch of a pen. When the figure has gone, I find a note tucked under the geranium pot. Call me, followed by a number already stored in my phone. I drop it in the bin and then, not yet brave enough, fish it out, flatten it, and slide it into the cutlery drawer beneath the knives. Later, the family group chat wakes itself. Birthdays, Avon orders, grandchildren in paper Easter bonnets, nestled among them, line that tilts the room. Let's not make this into a thing. Families have worse. I reply with nothing. Absence can be a boundary if you hold it steady. For company, I switch on a documentary about migrating geese. Their long V strokes the dusk, following a line written on the air that only they can see. The narrator says they take turns at the front because no one can fly into a headwind forever. I think about turns and fronts and winds I've stood in without noticing how tired I was. Near midnight, I tidy the living room as if a stranger might come and grate it. I fold blankets, align books, tuck coasters under lamp bases. Tidiness is not peace. The boiler coughs and settles. I make a list on a pad. What do I know? What do I need? Who is safe? The answers are smaller than I'd like, but not zero. I fetch the spare keys tin, take out the little Yale, and set it beside the letter. I don't have to use it tonight. I only need to remember it exists. In the morning, I will keep the appointment with the helpline voice and write down what the letter says without editing the pain out. For now, I switch the lamps off one by one and let the dark do its proper work, draw a clean line under the day. The woman from the helpline suggests we meet at the community center off the high street, the one with the notice board full of Pilates times and knit and natter. She wears the kind of cardigan that makes chairs feel safe. We sit with mugs that cool too quickly, and she says, with a fairness that doesn't flinch, that I am a kind person, but not a shield. It lands without fanfare, like a key set down on a table. We talk about the letter, about how apologies sometimes sweep up only around the feet of the mess, and about how older women in this country have been trained to be tidy before they are truthful. She asks what I need in the next 48 hours, not the next 48 years. I say, sleep that doesn't tear when I turn over, one sentence I can say without shaking, and a plan that doesn't require me to be braver than I am. Back home, I clear a corner of the kitchen table and make a small station the way you would for seedlings. Notebook, pen, the letter in a clear wallet, a glass of water, the spare keys tin beside them like a paperweight with a pulse. I write down dates I can remember, not to prosecute, but to put shape where fog has lived. She gives me a leaflet about a local group that meets on Tuesdays, mostly widows and grandmothers who have discovered that boundaries are not rudeness, but good housekeeping for the soul. I pin the leaflet to the corkboard where the bus timetable used to live. I set alarms on my phone, call GP, pick up the prescription, short walk if it's not hammering down, 15 minutes to read aloud the first paragraph of the letter, and then stop. The stopping is as important as the reading. We are learning not to sprint. On Wednesday, she teaches me short sentences that fit in the mouth like lozenges. I practice in the mirror between making tea and loading the washing machine. I'm not able to do that. That won't work for me. I need to leave now. 8 words or fewer so they survive a racing heart. We role-play the doorbell, the phone call, the family chat that wants everything smoothed. She shows me where to keep the phrases in the front of the notebook, on a card in my purse, on a sticky note inside the spare keys lid, so I don't have to engineer courage on the spot. When I get them wrong, we laugh, because laughter clears the air faster than explanation. I discover how heavy a yes can be when it is carrying a no inside it. The sentences get cleaner by afternoon. By evening, I am ready for a small rehearsal of the room where the long conversation will happen. I open the windows to let the heating dust out. I set 2 chairs at a right angle so we don't face off like boxes. I put my notes under the glass tray on the coffee table, not to hide them, but to anchor them. The Yale key from the tin sits beside the tray. I don't plan to use it, but I like the truth of its weight. I breathe in the way she taught me, count to 4, hold for 4, out for 6. Twice through, before I answer anything important, the house feels less like a witness and more like a friend. When I make the last cup of the day, I say aloud and without apology that telling the truth and being unkind are different practices. The kettle clicks off. Rain starts again on the slate roofs. I take my seat in my own life and find that it holds. By Thursday, the plan is small and sturdy. 2 chairs set at a right angle, a lamp on low, windows cracked for air. My notes are under the glass tray on the coffee table, dates, brief lines, the 3 statements I have practiced until they fit in the mouth without snagging. I'm not able to do that. That won't work for me. I need to leave now. I have told no one the time, only that I will be at home between 2 and 3. The spare keys tin sits on the sideboard, the little Yale resting on its lid. It is not a threat. It is punctuation. I put the kettle on not for hospitality, but for steadiness. The house feels alert, but not afraid, like an old dog that knows the postman by step. When the bell goes 3 neat notes, I breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, twice, then open the door to a face that is older and softer and still somehow arranged around the center of itself. We do not shake hands. I show the way to the sitting room and take my seat at the angle I set. The other chair is accepted with a sigh that thinks it is private. There is small talk, the weather, the trains, the way prices make a mockery of lists, and then the reason we are here begins to thread itself in. I keep my palms on my knees so my hands cannot volunteer to fix things. I say, I have received the letter. I say the apology is noted. I say we will need to be clear. The conversation tries to become a fog. I let it thin against the edges of the notes under glass. When I am told it was all a misunderstanding, I answer, I understand you prefer that word. I do not. When I am told that families are complicated, I answer, complications are not a license. When I am told that at our age we must be sensible, I can answer, sensible now means truthful. There is a moment when the old choreography makes a bid, my body offering tea, my voice offering a softer root. The sentence, perhaps you're right, hovering like a coat you could put on to be let out of the rain. I sit it out. I read calmly 3 short records. This happened. I felt unsafe. I will not repeat it. The air does not crack. It holds. The face opposite rearranges itself 3 times and then settles into something like listening. I add one request. If we continue, it will be with respect for my words as they are said. The reply is not generous, but it is audible. We pause for the kettle, which has chosen this exact minute to click off. I pour 2 cups and slide one across the glass, the notes visible beneath like a map you don't have to look at to follow. When defense arrives first in humor, then in weather reports from decades ago, I repeat my sentences as taught. No embroidery. That won't work for me. I'm not able to do that. I need to leave now. The third one opens a small, necessary silence. I place the Yale key from the spare keys tin on the tray beside the cups. A quiet object lesson. The conversation remembers itself and steps back from the edge. We agree 2 practical points. There will be no late-night calls, and any meeting will happen in daylight with another person present. I write them down and say them aloud. The other chair nods, not happily, but enough that the room releases its shoulders. We stand. No hug, no ceremony, only coats located and a door held open without debt. On the step, the sky is the color of dishwater again, but it is honest about it. I close the door, lean my forehead against the wood, and let the breath out in a ribbon. In the kitchen, the kettle is still warm. I wash 2 cups, even though only one was used. The house settles. I sit and discover a plain, unfamiliar relief. I did not abandon myself to keep the peace. That night, sleep arrives like a sensible friend who lets themselves in with a spare key and switches the light off without a speech. It is not dramatic. It is deep, the kind that mends the small rips you earn by being brave in daylight. I wake once to the familiar cough of the boiler and once to the fox in the lane, and neither visit stays. In the morning, the house has shifted by a degree you can't point to on a thermostat. The kettle sounds less like a warning and more like a dart. I take the letter from its clear wallet and put it in a plain brown envelope with today's date. Then lay it in the drawer where tax returns and guarantees lie with things you keep, not because you need them every day, but because it steadies you to know where they are. By the weekend, I am walking to the community center again, past the chemist and the bakery with the good sourdough, to the small room behind the notice board where women my age trade recipes and boundaries with the same practical tone. We sit in a loose circle, knit and natter without apology, and I practice the difference between kindness and caretaking. I learned that forgiveness is not amnesia. It is memory that no longer keeps you trapped in the same corridor. On Sundays, I light a candle at the back of the church and say thank you in the plain way I was taught. For sleep, for a voice that didn't tremble, for the 2 sentences that did the work without bruising anyone. I tidy the kitchen not to erase feeling, but to make space for it. When anxiety nosedives in, I stand by the open window and breathe the 4-4-6 we rehearsed. The air doesn't fix everything. It reminds me I'm allowed to take up room in it. Meaning is quieter than I expected. It shows up as small refusals and small welcomes. I don't answer calls after 10. I do answer my own needs in full words. I keep the spare keys tin where I can see it, not as a dare, but as a companion. Some afternoons I take the bus to the park and sit with a book I may or may not finish. A blackbird riffs in the hedge. A child in a red coat negotiates with a puddle and wins. I go home by the long route because time is different when you're no longer borrowing your calm from other people. At the sink, I wash a single cup and leave it to dry without lining anything up. The letter remains in its drawer. The door remains on its hinges, and my life feels less like a corridor and more like a house with windows open. I do not forgive on command. I forgive on purpose. I do not forget. I remember and keep my hands on my side of the table. When I switch the lamps on, the room looks back without flinching, and I take that as proof that courage, done quietly, still counts. If you're listening in a small kitchen like mine, rain on the window and the kettle just beginning to mutter, this is for you. You have the right to take up space in your own life. Kindness does not require silence when the truth needs speaking. We can keep our dignity and still set a line. Age does not cancel the need for safety. It sharpens it. I am 74, and I am learning this in real time. If parts of today's story sit too close to your own, pause, make a cup of tea, open a window, and come back when your breath has caught up. Here are 2 small, safe steps you can take this week. 1. Write one boundary sentence of 6 to 8 words and put it where you will see it on the fridge, inside a cupboard, tucked in your purse. Examples: I'm not able to do that. That won't work for me. I need to leave now. Practice it out loud until it fits in your mouth without wobbling. 2. Choose one ally. It might be a friend, a neighbor, your Jeep, someone at church, or a local community helpline. Tell them plainly what you need today, not forever. Save their number under favorites. If you feel unsafe or unwell, seek professional help. Ring your GP or 111 for non-emergencies and $9.99 in an emergency. If this episode helped, leave a quiet note for others like us. You can write me as well and add one boundary you will set this week. If you prefer privacy, write it on paper and keep it in your spare keys tin as a promise to yourself. Share this with someone who might need a steady voice in their kitchen tonight. Next time, I'll tell you about the notebook I found at the back of a church that changed how I look at family. Until then, keep the kettle, the window, and your courage within reach.